The massive crystalline doors of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber groaned open with the weight of 10,000 years of authority. Ambassador Marcus Kane stepped through, his black diplomatic uniform stark against the prismatic walls that stretched impossibly high into the void above. Behind him walked Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's chief xenobiologist, her datapad clutched tightly as she surveyed the amphitheater of alien dignitaries. 300 species had gathered for this moment. The Vorthak delegation, their insectoid, forms clicking in rhythmic disapproval, occupied the eastern wing. The gaseous Netherians floated in their containment spheres, their thoughts rippling through translated electromagnetic pulses. At the apex sat the Council of Seven, the galaxy's most ancient and powerful civilizations, their representatives, shrouded in ceremonial robes that seemed to absorb light itself. The chamber fell silent as the humans approached the speaking platform. Every eye, sensor, and detection organ focused on these two representatives of the youngest species to achieve interstellar travel. The weight of their judgment pressed down like gravity from a neutron star. "Humans of Sol 3, boomed the voice of Supreme Arbiter Krell, his four eyes focusing independently on the two figures below. The Hegemarch's massive form dominated the central throne, his scaled hide bearing the scars of countless diplomatic battles. "You stand accused of violating the Codex of Stellar Neutrality. Your species has been observed providing military aid to the Altarian refugees, directly interfering in the Hegemony War." Marcus raised his chin, meeting the alien's gaze without flinching. The chamber's acoustics carried his voice to every corner without amplification. "We provided humanitarian assistance to civilians fleeing genocide. The Codex allows for the protection of non-combatants." Silence. The word crashed through the chamber like a shockwave, causing several smaller species to retreat deeper into their protective shells. The Altarians were designated as enemy combatants by this council. "Your interference has prolonged their suffering and destabilized 3 star systems. The penalty for such actions is immediate quarantine of your homeworld for 50 galactic cycles." A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the assembly like wind through tall grass. Humanity was young, barely 2 centuries into interstellar space. They had been tolerated, even patronized by some of the more benevolent species, but never respected. This was their place being made clear by the galaxy's supreme authority. The human delegates exchanged a glance that several species had learned to recognize during humanity's brief time among the stars. It was not fear, nor was it submission. It was something far more dangerous. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her voice cutting through the alien chatter with surprising authority. "Before you pass judgment, Arbiter Krell, perhaps you should ask yourselves one question. Why did we help the Altarians?" The chamber fell silent again. Even the Vorthak stopped their incessant clicking, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's ethereal light as they focused on the small human female. Marcus smiled, an expression that had become legendarily unsettling to many species during humanity's diplomatic missions. It was a predator's smile, though most of the council had forgotten that humans were persistence hunters who had conquered their homeworld through sheer determination. "You see, honored council," Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space, we humans have a saying, "One good turn deserves another." The Altarians once did something for us, something you've all forgotten, or perhaps never bothered to record in your vast databases. Supreme Arbiter Krell's secondary arms twitched, a sign of growing irritation among his species. "Explain quickly, human. This council's patience has limits. 47 years ago, when humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel, we were enthusiastic about exploring the galaxy, perhaps recklessly so." Marcus began walking slowly around the chamber's perimeter, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. "Our exploration ship, the Terra Nova, suffered catastrophic engine failure in the Kepler 442 system. 63 crew members were dying in the void, their life support failing, their emergency beacon crying out into the darkness of space. Elena's datapad projected a holographic star chart above the chamber floor, the 3-dimensional display rotating slowly to show the remote system where the crisis had occurred. Red indicators marked the ship's last known position, while blue lines traced the routes of nearby vessels that could have provided assistance. No council species responded to our distress beacon. Elena continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. After all, we were just another primitive species learning to crawl between the stars. Our technology was crude, our understanding of galactic politics non-existent. We had nothing to offer in return for rescue. But the Altarians... Marcus paused, letting the silence build as he stopped directly beneath the Council of Seven's elevated platform. They diverted 3 of their deep space medical frigates to save those 63 humans. They spent 2 weeks repairing our ship, shared their food and medical supplies, and asked for nothing in return except that we remember their kindness. Counselor Thane, his rocky features carved from the granite of his homeworld's mountains, leaned forward on his throne.
Ancient history. What bearing does this have on your current crimes against galactic stability? Marcus's smile grew sharper, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. One of those 63 crew members was Dr. James Morrison, our leading expert in quantum field manipulation.
Another was Admiral Lisa Zhang, who would later command our deep space fleet and develop our early warning systems. And one was my father, Captain David Kane, who carried with him the complete genetic database of Earth's extinct species. The high implications began to settle over the chamber like a morning fog, obscuring the familiar and revealing something entirely new and potentially dangerous. You see, honored council, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Humanity learned something that day about the value of compassion. We learned that sometimes, saving lives is more important than following the letter of galactic law. The Altarians taught us that mercy is not weakness, but strength. But more importantly, Marcus added, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber, they saved the one human who would become the architect of our planetary defense grid, the man who would perfect gravitational wave detection technology, the man who would develop the quantum communication networks that allow us to monitor every ship movement in this galaxy in real time. The chamber erupted like a volcano. Delegates rose from their seats in waves, alien languages mixing in a cacophony of confusion, alarm, and growing fear. The implications of Marcus's words were becoming terrifyingly clear to species that had survived for millennia through careful calculation of power balances. Supreme Arbiter Krell raised a massive hand for silence, his 4 eyes now all focused on the 2 humans below. When he spoke, his voice carried a note that had not been heard in these chambers for centuries. Uncertainty. You dare threaten this council with espionage? Threaten? Marcus laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the crystalline chamber. No, Arbiter. We're simply explaining why we helped our friends. You asked us to justify our actions under galactic law. We're telling you that everything we do has a reason, and that reason extends far beyond your laws. Elena activated another hologram, this one showing shipping routes, military movements, and classified communications from across the galaxy. The data streams flowed like rivers of light, revealing a surveillance network that spanned star systems and penetrated the deepest secrets of galactic civilization. For 47 years, we've been watching, learning, preparing. Not for conquest, because we're not interested in ruling the galaxy, but we've been getting ready for the day when someone would try to punish us for doing what we believe is right. The silence in the chamber was now absolute. 300 civilizations, some older than Earth's sun, stared at 2 humans who had just revealed that their species had been observing, analyzing, and preparing for this moment for nearly half a century. Marcus turned to face the Council of 7 directly, his expression calm as deep space. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to rescind the quarantine order. You're going to provide safe passage for all remaining Altarian refugees. And you're going to remember that humanity keeps its word to its friends no matter what the consequences. And if we refuse? Arbiter Krell's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Elena's smile was colder than the void between stars. Then you'll discover what happens when a species that's been planning for 47 years decides to stop being polite and start being honest about what we're capable of. The crystalline walls of the judgment chamber seemed to pulse with an Ominous light as the galaxy's most powerful beings realized they were no longer the apex predators they had believed themselves to be for millennia. The emergency session convened within the hour, something that had not happened in the Galactic Council's 10,000-year history. The crystalline chamber hummed with an energy that felt almost alive as representatives from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations gathered in urgent consultation. The humans had been escorted to a holding area, but their words continued to echo through the minds of beings who had thought themselves masters of the galaxy. Supreme Arbiter Krell stood at the center of the Council of Seven's private deliberation sphere, his massive form casting shadows that seemed to move independently of his body. Around him, the other 6 supreme representatives of the galaxy's eldest species formed a circle of ancient power and growing uncertainty. "The humans cannot be serious," Counselor Vex whispered, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into fractured rainbows. 2 centuries of spaceflight against our millennia of civilization? It's impossible. Yet they knew about the hegemony fleet movements before we announced them publicly, rumbled Counselor Thane, his granite features showing the first cracks of doubt. They knew about the Netherian trade negotiations with the Outer Rim colonies. How? Through the observation ports, they could see the main chamber where hundreds of species waited in nervous tension. The Vorthak delegation had begun their war clicking, a sound that traditionally preceded violence among their kind. The methane breathers had sealed their environmental suits and were preparing for rapid departure. Fear was spreading through the galactic community like wildfire. Counselor Yelan, her serpentine form coiled in agitation, accessed the central database with a thought. Her mental connection to the Council's vast information network allowed her to process data at speeds that would overwhelm most organic minds. What she found made her scales turn pale with shock. "The Terra Nova incident," she hissed. "I have the complete records. 63 humans rescued by Altarian medical frigates 47 years ago. But look at this." Her mental projection filled the sphere with data streams. Every one of those humans went on to hold critical positions in Earth's government, military, or scientific community. Arbiter Krell's 4 eyes narrowed as he absorbed the information. Admiral Lisa Zhang, current commander of Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Network. Dr. James Morrison, chief architect of humanity's quantum communication grid. Captain David Kane, who became director of planetary defense. "It's as if they planned it," Counselor Thane muttered, his voice carrying a note of grudging respect. "As if they knew exactly who to save." Or, Counselor Vex interjected, her crystalline thoughts ringing like bells. They saved everyone and then carefully placed the survivors in positions where they could build exactly what humanity needed to become a galactic power. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. These were beings who had played the long game of galactic politics for millennia. But humanity appeared to be playing a game with rules none of them understood. Meanwhile, in the holding chamber, Marcus Kane sat calmly while Elena Vasquez continued to analyze data streams flowing through her quantum-encrypted datapad. The room was designed to be comfortable for a variety of species, with adjustable atmosphere controls and seating that could accommodate everything from gaseous entities to multi-limbed creatures. For humans, it felt almost cozy. "They're scared," Elena observed, watching the biorhythm patterns of various council members through their surveillance network. Krell's stress hormones are spiking. Vex is cycling through defensive postures. Thane's mineral composition is shifting toward his combat configuration. Marcus nodded, sipping water from a container that looked deceptively simple, but was actually made from materials that didn't exist in most star systems. Fear makes people predictable, and predictable enemies make mistakes. "Are we really going to do this?" Elena asked quietly. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way again." "The galaxy already sees us as useful primitives," Marcus replied. "At least this way they'll see us as useful primitives who can bite back." A soft chime indicated an incoming message through their quantum communication network. Elena's expression grew serious as she read the encrypted text. "It's from Admiral Zhang. Operation Lighthouse is ready to begin on your command. All monitoring stations are reporting green status." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, the weight of decision settling on his shoulders like a lead cloak. Operation Lighthouse represented 47 years of careful preparation, the culmination of humanity's patient observation of galactic civilization. Once activated, There would be no hiding what humanity had become. The door to their holding chamber dilated, admitting Arbiter Krell's personal herald, a floating mechanical construct that had served the Council for over 1,000 years. Its voice was artificially modulated to convey the authority of its master. The Council will see you now. You will answer questions regarding your surveillance capabilities and intentions toward galactic security. Marcus stood, adjusting his diplomatic uniform with practiced precision. Of course. We're always happy to answer questions when they're asked politely. As they walked back toward the main chamber, Elena leaned close enough to whisper, "The Altarian refugee ships are 3 hours from the neutral zone boundary. If the Council doesn't act soon, the hegemony forces will intercept them. Then we'd better make sure the Council acts soon," Marcus replied. The crystalline doors opened once again, revealing a chamber that had transformed in their absence. Where before there had been formal delegations arranged by species and alliance, now there were clear battle lines. The militaristic species had clustered together on one side, their representatives bristling with barely contained aggression. The merchant guilds had formed their own coalition, their members calculating profit and loss with visible intensity. The ancient powers sat in isolated splendor, each nursing their own concerns about humanity's revelations. Supreme Arbiter Krell had taken his place at the apex of the chamber, but his posture suggested a predator that had suddenly realized it might be prey. When he spoke, his voice carried across the vast space with carefully controlled authority. "Humans of Earth, you have made claims about surveillance capabilities that, if true, represent a violation of every treaty governing interstellar intelligence gathering. You will provide evidence of these claims or face immediate classification as a rogue civilization subject to containment protocols." Marcus walked to the center of the chamber, his movements unhurried despite the implied threat. "Evidence? Of course, Arbiter. Elena, would you please show our friends what we've been watching?" Elena's datapad projected a hologram that filled the entire chamber with a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. But this was not the sanitized political map usually displayed in council sessions. This was a real-time tactical display showing the movement of every ship larger than a transport shuttle, every military installation, every hidden base that the various species thought were secret. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates recognized their own classified operations displayed for all to see. The hegemony's secret fleet movements toward Altarian space were clearly marked in red. The Vorthak's hidden military buildup in the outer rim blazed with warning indicators. Even the Council's own covert surveillance networks were laid bare like dissected specimens. 47 years, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the pandemonium. 47 years of watching, listening, and learning. We know about the Netherian experiments with temporal manipulation. We know about the hegemony's plans to expand into the neutral zones. We know about the secret meetings between the merchant guilds and the pirate confederations. He paused, letting the implications sink in. We know everything, because the Altarians taught us that information is the greatest gift you can give to those who need protection. Arbiter Krell's massive form seemed to shrink as the reality of humanity's position became clear. "What do you want?" "Justice for our friends," Marcus replied simply. "Safe passage for the Altarian refugees, an end to the hegemony's genocide, and a new understanding between humanity and the galactic community. And if we refuse?" Elena's smile was sharp as broken crystal. "Then we stop watching quietly and start sharing what we've learned with everyone who might find it interesting. Starting with your enemies." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft hum of the chamber's crystalline walls, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The galaxy's power structure had just shifted on its axis, and no one was certain where it would settle. The holographic display continued to rotate slowly in the center of the chamber, each revolution revealing new secrets that various species had thought buried in the depths of space. The Galactic Council had become a theater of exposure, with humanity as both director and audience to the unraveling of 10,000 years of carefully maintained diplomatic fiction. Counselor Vex was the first to break the stunned silence. Her crystalline form rang like a struck bell as she spoke, harmonics of fear and rage mixing in her voice. "This is an act of war against every sovereign species in the galaxy. You have violated the sanctity of our borders, our privacy, our very existence." Marcus turned toward her delegation, his expression remaining perfectly calm despite the magnitude of the accusation. "War. We've been preventing wars. Do you know how many conflicts we've quietly stopped by providing anonymous tips about troop movements? How many trade disputes we've resolved by ensuring the right information reached the right people at the right time? Elena stepped forward, her datapad shifting the holographic display to focus on a region of space near the crystalline territories. 3 months ago, your mining fleets were about to encounter hegemony patrol squadrons in the disputed Zeta-9 system. The encounter would have triggered a border war that could have lasted decades. The display zoomed in, showing the precise trajectories of both fleets converging on a collision course. Then red warning indicators appeared, marking the locations where humanity had deployed automated beacon drones. We sent false asteroid storm warnings to both fleets, Marcus explained. Neither side ever knew the other was there. No war, no bloodshed, no destabilization of the galactic economy, just a small act of kindness that prevented millions of deaths. Counselor Vex's crystalline structure flickered with rapid color changes, a sign of deep emotional processing among her species. You manipulated sovereign military operations. We prevented a catastrophe, Elena corrected, just like we've been doing for 47 years. The chamber began to buzz with urgent conversations as delegates realized the implications. How many of their recent diplomatic successes had been influenced by human intervention? How many disasters had been averted by manipulation they never detected? Supreme Arbiter Krell raised his hand for silence, but his authority felt diminished in the face of humanity's revelations. Even if your intentions were benevolent, the capability you describe represents a threat to every civilization in the galaxy. No single species should possess such power. And yet, Marcus replied, you were perfectly content to let the hegemony slaughter the Altarians without intervention. Where was the Council's concern for balance then? The accusation hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, while others began accessing their personal data systems to review the timeline of the Altarian crisis. Counselor Yilan uncoiled from her meditation pose, her serpentine form rising to its full height. The hegemony war was declared under legitimate territorial expansion protocols. The Altarians refused standard relocation offers. The Altarians refused to abandon their sacred burial grounds. Elena interjected, her voice carrying a sharp edge. According to our surveillance, the hegemony knew the religious significance of those sites. They chose conquest over negotiation. Another hologram appeared, this one showing intercepted hegemony communications dating back to the beginning of the conflict. The translated text scrolled past in multiple languages, revealing a systematic plan to eliminate Altarian culture along with their population. The hegemony representative, General Korak, stood abruptly from his delegation. His armored form bristled with weapons that were supposedly ceremonial, but looked capable of devastating lethality. How dare you present classified military communications in this forum? Such evidence is inadmissible under galactic law. Marcus smiled, the expression growing more dangerous with each passing moment. Inadmissible? General, we're not in a court of law. We're in a chamber where the galaxy's future is being decided. And that future includes the question of whether the hegemony will be allowed to continue its policy of cultural extinction. The hegemony acts within established parameters of territorial expansion, Korax growled, his voice carrying the mechanical enhancement of his species' vocal amplifiers. The Altarians were given fair warning. Fair warning to abandon everything that made them who they were, Elena replied. Fair warning to become refugees in their own galaxy. Fair warning to die quietly. The holographic display shifted again, this time showing real-time feeds from the Altarian refugee convoy. 63 ships overcrowded with families who had fled their homeworld with nothing but the clothes on their backs, limping through space toward the promise of sanctuary in the neutral zones. Those ships will reach the border in 2 hours and 17 minutes, Marcus announced. The hegemony interdiction fleet will intercept them in 2 hours and 37 minutes. 20 minutes to decide whether the Altarians live or die. General Korax's armor systems powered up with an audible whine. The refugee convoy carries military supplies and armed combatants. They will be stopped and searched according to standard protocols. Your standard protocols involve spacing anyone who resists, Elena said quietly. We have recordings of 17 previous searches that ended in the complete elimination of refugee populations. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the magnitude of what they were hearing. The hegemony's reputation for ruthlessness was well known. But few realized the systematic nature of their approach to conquered populations. Counselor Thane's granite features shifted as he processed the implications. If these records are accurate, the hegemony has been conducting genocide under the cover of territorial expansion protocols. The hegemony acts within its rights as a sovereign power, Korax replied. But his voice carried a defensive note that had not been there before. Not anymore, Marcus said simply. The holographic display changed one final time, showing something that made every delegate in the chamber gasp in simultaneous recognition. It was a real-time view of space around the hegemony's home system, but instead of the empty void that should have surrounded their heavily defended world, the display showed hundreds of objects moving in precise formation. They were ships, but not like any ships the galaxy had seen before, sleek angular vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with a coordination that suggested either advanced artificial intelligence or a level of tactical communication that approached telepathy. The Earth Defense Fleet, Elena announced. 237 vessels currently maintaining position around Hegemony Prime. They've been there for 6 hours, completely undetected by Hegemony sensors. General Korax's armor systems began cycling through defensive configurations as he stared at the display. Impossible. Our detection grid covers every approach vector to the home system. Your detection grid covers every known approach vector, Marcus corrected. We've been mapping gravitational anomalies and quantum fluctuations for 47 years. We know about paths through space that your species hasn't discovered yet. The implications crashed over the chamber like a tidal wave. Humanity had not only been watching the galaxy, they had been preparing for war on a scale that none of the established powers had imagined possible. Supreme Arbiter Krell's voice shook as he spoke. You have positioned a military fleet around a council member's homeworld. This is an act of aggression that demands immediate response. This is a demonstration, Marcus replied calmly. A reminder that the Altarians have friends who are willing to protect them. The fleet will withdraw as soon as the refugee convoy reaches safety. And if we refuse your demands, Elena's datapad chimed softly, indicating an incoming priority message. She read it quickly, her expression growing grimmer with each word. Admiral Zhang reports that hegemony forces have begun acceleration toward the refugee convoy. Intercept time is now 1 hour and 53 minutes. Marcus turned to face the Council of Seven directly. Then you have 1 hour and 53 minutes to decide whether you want to remain the arbiters of galactic justice or become witnesses to the consequences of allowing genocide to continue. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates realized that humanity had just delivered an ultimatum. To the most powerful governing body in the galaxy, the balance of power that had maintained peace for millennia was crumbling, and no one knew what would rise to replace it. In the eye of the storm, 2 humans stood calmly, waiting for the galaxy to make its choice. The countdown had begun, and with it came a transformation of the Galactic Council that none of the assembled delegates had witnessed in their lifetimes. Ancient alliances cracked under the pressure of humanity's ultimatum, while new coalitions formed with desperate speed. The chamber had become a crucible where 10,000 years of galactic politics were being melted down, and reforged Supreme Arbiter Krell found himself in the unprecedented position of having his authority questioned not by rebellion, but by the simple reality that another species had demonstrated capabilities that made the Council's power structure obsolete. His 4 eyes tracked the movements of various delegations as they huddled in urgent consultation, and what he saw filled him with a dread that went deeper than fear. 1 hour and 37 minutes, Elena announced, her voice carrying easily through the chaos. The holographic display continued to show the converging trajectories of the Altarian refugee convoy and the hegemony interdiction fleet, each update bringing them closer to a confrontation that would define the galaxy's future. The methane breathers had been the first to break ranks, their sealed environmental suits gliding toward the chamber's exit as they prepared to abandon what they clearly saw as a lost cause. The merchant guilds were frantically calculating the economic implications of a war between humanity and the established powers, their representatives speaking in rapid bursts of mathematical language that translated to profit margins and loss projections. But it was the reaction of the ancient powers that truly revealed the magnitude of the crisis. Counselor Vex had ceased her crystalline harmonics entirely, her form now a dull, almost opaque structure that reflected nothing. In her species, such silence was equivalent to preparing for death. Counselor Yilan had coiled herself into a defensive spiral, her serpentine form becoming a living shield around her essential organs. Even Counselor Thane, whose granite physiology was nearly indestructible, had begun the slow process of converting his surface layer to diamond hardness. "They're afraid," Marcus observed quietly, though his words carried to every corner of the chamber, through the acoustic properties of the crystalline walls. "For 10,000 years they've been the masters of the galaxy, because they controlled information, resources, and military power. Now they discover that a species they considered barely above primitives has been watching their every move, and preparing for this moment." General Corax stepped forward, his armored form radiating barely contained violence. "Your threats will not succeed, human. The hegemony has faced extinction events before and survived them all. We will not bow to the demands of an infant species." "We're not asking you to bow," Elena replied, her datapad displaying new information about hegemony fleet movements. "We're asking you to stop murdering innocent people. The fact that you consider this an unreasonable request tells us everything we need to know about your civilization." "The Altarians are not innocent," Corax snarled. "They harbored terrorists who attacked our colonies. They refused legitimate relocation orders. They chose war over peace." The holographic display shifted to show archived footage from Altarian worlds before the war. Cities built in harmony with natural landscapes, art forms that incorporated living ecosystems, and a society that had achieved sustainable development across dozens of star systems. Then the timeline advanced to show the same worlds after hegemony, pacification. Barren landscapes stripped of resources, cities reduced to rubble, and the systematic elimination of every trace of Altarian culture. "They chose to exist," Marcus said simply. "You chose to make that a crime." The weight of evidence was undeniable, and delegates throughout the chamber began to shift their positions. The Pacifist Alliance, led by species that had long advocated for nonviolent resolution of conflicts, moved closer to the human position. Several of the younger civilizations that had achieved spaceflight within the last few millennia also began to align themselves with humanity's stance, but the most significant change came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Trill of the Traitor Confederation stood slowly, her amphibious form glistening under the chamber's lights. The traitors were known for their absolute neutrality in galactic politics, their commitment to profit over principle. For her to speak on matters of war and peace was unprecedented. "The Confederation has maintained detailed shipping records for the past 50 years, she announced, her voice carrying the musical quality of her aquatic species. "Our data confirms the human claims about hegemony activities. We have documentation of refugee ships that departed Altarian space and never reached their declared destinations. Cargo manifests that list biological waste disposal in systems where the hegemony claimed no military operations were taking place. General Corax's armor systems powered up to combat readiness. The Traitor Confederation has no authority to investigate sovereign military operations. The Confederation has the authority to protect our shipping lanes," Trill replied calmly. "And those shipping lanes have been contaminated with the debris of murdered civilians for 3 years." The revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. The Traitor Confederation's shipping records were considered the most accurate and impartial documentation of galactic activities. Their confirmation of humanity's accusations carried weight that no amount of political maneuvering could dismiss. Counselor Yilan slowly uncoiled from her defensive position, her serpentine form rising to address the chamber. "If the Confederation's records are accurate, the hegemony has been conducting systematic genocide while claiming territorial expansion rights. This represents a violation of the fundamental principles upon which the Council was founded." "Principles," General Corax spat. "The galaxy operates on strength, not principles. The strong expand, the weaker absorbed. This has been the natural order for millions of years." "The natural order is about to change," Marcus replied. 1 hour and 19 minutes. Elena's datapad chimed with an urgent priority message. She read it quickly, her expression growing grim. "Admiral Zhang reports that the hegemony interdiction fleet has divided into 3 groups. They're not just planning to intercept the refugee convoy, they're setting up a triangular formation that will prevent any escape." The holographic display updated to show the new tactical situation. The hegemony forces had positioned themselves to create a kill zone around the refugee convoy's projected path. There would be no negotiation, no opportunity for surrender. It was a formation designed for complete annihilation. Supreme Arbiter Krell finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of authority that was rapidly slipping away from him. The Council cannot condone genocide, regardless of the political complexities involved. General Corax, you will order your fleets to withdraw from the refugee convoy's path. I take orders from the Hegemony High Command, not from this council, Corax replied. The refugees carry stolen military technology and wanted war criminals. They will be stopped. Then you leave us no choice, Marcus said quietly. Elena's fingers moved across her datapad with practiced efficiency. Admiral Zhang, you are authorized to implement Operation Lighthouse immediately. All monitoring stations are green for transmission. Throughout the galaxy, humanity's surveillance network activated simultaneously. Every secret the humans had gathered over 47 years of careful observation began broadcasting on open channels. Military positions, diplomatic communications, trade agreements, corruption schemes, illegal weapons development, and 1,000 other classified secrets flooded the galactic communication networks. The Chamber's displays erupted with information. As delegates watched their civilization's most carefully guarded secrets become public knowledge. The Vorthak's secret alliance with the pirate confederations was revealed. The Netherians' experiments with temporal manipulation were exposed. The Merchant Guild's price-fixing conspiracies were laid bare for all to see. But the most devastating revelations concerned the Council itself. Decades of backroom deals, corrupt appointments, and the systematic suppression of inconvenient information were displayed for the galaxy to witness. The organization that had presented itself as the guardian of galactic justice was revealed to be as flawed and self-serving as any other political entity. 47 years of watching, Marcus announced as chaos engulfed the chamber. 47 years of learning that the galaxy is ruled by fear, greed, and the willingness to ignore suffering when it's convenient. Today, that ends. General Corax was frantically trying to contact his fleet commanders, but the communication channels were flooded with the data dump from Operation Lighthouse. Military frequencies, diplomatic channels, and even emergency services were overwhelmed with the torrent of information that humanity had unleashed. You've destroyed galactic civilization, Counselor Vex whispered, her crystalline form now completely transparent with shock. We've exposed it, Elena corrected. Whether it survives depends on what the galaxy chooses to do with the truth. The countdown continued, each passing minute bringing the refugee convoy closer to their fate. But now the entire galaxy was watching, and the weight of that observation was beginning to shift the balance of power in ways that no one could predict. The galaxy had never been so quiet and yet so loud at the same time. Across 10,000 star systems on 1,000,000 worlds and in the depths of space between the stars, beings watched as the countdown approached zero. The flood of information from Operation Lighthouse had reached every corner of civilization, and the revelations were reshaping the political landscape in real time. On the Council Chamber's main display, the tactical situation showed the Altarian refugee convoy entering the kill zone that General Corax had so carefully prepared. 63 ships carrying the last survivors of a proud civilization, moving inexorably toward their destruction while the galaxy held its breath. 37 minutes, Elena announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. But something had changed in the chamber. The chaos and panic that had followed humanity's information dump had given way to a different kind of energy. Delegates were receiving communications from their homeworlds, and the messages they carried were transforming the political equation with every passing moment. Ambassador Trill of the Trader Confederation was the first to report the shift. The merchant fleets are refusing to honor contracts with the hegemony. Our shipping lanes are being closed to hegemony vessels effective immediately. Counselor Thane's granite features registered surprise as he accessed his own communication channels. The Industrial Consortium is suspending all trade agreements with hegemony worlds. The economic sanctions are being implemented faster than our bureaucracy typically processes routine paperwork. General Corax spun toward the Council of Seven, his armored form bristling with weapon systems. This is economic warfare. The Council must intervene to maintain commercial stability. The Council must address the will of its member species. Supreme Arbiter Krell replied, his four eyes scanning the incoming reports that flooded his consciousness. And it appears that will is becoming quite clear. Throughout the chamber, delegates were announcing similar decisions. The Pacifist Alliance had declared a complete embargo on hegemony trade. The younger civilizations were pooling their military resources to form a protection convoy for the Altarian refugees. Even some of the ancient powers were beginning to distance themselves from the hegemony's actions. Marcus watched the transformation with satisfaction, but his attention remained focused on the tactical display. 29 minutes. Admiral Zhang, what's the status of the interdiction fleet? Elena's datapad chimed with the response. The hegemony commanders are reporting communication difficulties. Several ships have broken formation. There appear to be disagreements about rules of engagement. The holographic display zoomed in on the hegemony formation, revealing something extraordinary. Individual ships were indeed breaking away from the attack formation, their transponders broadcasting messages of withdrawal. The carefully orchestrated kill zone was dissolving as ship commanders made individual decisions about their participation in genocide. General Corax was frantically trying to re-establish contact with his fleet, but the communication channels remained flooded with the ongoing data transmission from Operation Lighthouse. More importantly, the ships that were still receiving his orders were choosing not to obey them. The crew of the hegemony destroyer Vengeance is requesting political asylum, Elena reported, reading from her datapad. They're asking to be classified as conscientious objectors rather than participants in war crimes. Impossible, Corax snarled. Hegemony military personnel are bound by oath to follow all legitimate orders. Legitimate orders, Marcus repeated. There's the key phrase. When your own people can see the evidence of what you've been doing, they have to decide whether those orders are legitimate anymore. The avalanche had begun, and nothing could stop it now. Ship after ship was breaking away from the interdiction fleet as crews realized they were being asked to participate in the systematic murder of refugees. The flood of information from Operation Lighthouse had included detailed records of previous hegemony, pacification missions, and the military personnel involved were finally seeing the full scope of what their organization had been doing. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. The Chamber's communication systems activated to receive a priority transmission from Hegemony Prime itself. The image that appeared was that of Admiral Dex Corvin, General Corax's own superior officer and one of the most feared military commanders in the galaxy. General Corax, Admiral Corvin's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You are hereby relieved of command and ordered to return to Hegemony Prime for debriefing. All military operations against civilian targets are suspended pending a full review of our operational procedures. General Corax's armor systems powered down in shock. Admiral, the humans have compromised our entire intelligence network. We cannot allow this precedent to stand. The humans have exposed our crimes to the galaxy, Admiral Corvin replied coldly. The Hegemony High Command has reviewed the evidence presented in their data transmission. We find their accusations to be substantially accurate. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony itself was acknowledging the validity of humanity's accusations. The most militaristic civilization in the galaxy was backing down in the face of evidence that they could no longer deny or suppress. Effective immediately, Admiral Corvin continued, all hegemony forces will withdraw from Altarian space. Refugee convoys will be granted safe passage to the neutral zones. The hegemony accepts responsibility for violations of galactic law regarding the treatment of civilian populations. General Corax stood frozen in his armor, a monument to the collapse of everything he had believed about hegemony supremacy. Around him, the chamber began to buzz with conversation as delegates realized they were witnessing the peaceful resolution of a crisis that could have destroyed galactic civilization. 15 minutes, Elena announced, but the words carried a different meaning now. The refugee convoy would reach the former kill zone in 15 minutes, but instead of finding death, they would find safe passage to sanctuary. Marcus turned to address the Council of Seven directly. The immediate crisis is resolved, but the larger questions remain. The galaxy has seen what happens when information is hidden, and power is concentrated in the hands of those who abuse it. The question now is what kind of civilization we want to build going forward. Supreme Arbiter Krell was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what had just occurred. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of grudging respect. Humanity has demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally alter the balance of galactic power. What assurances can you provide that this surveillance network will not be used for conquest or coercion? The same assurance the Altarians gave us 47 years ago, Marcus replied. Our word backed by our actions. We saved the Altarians because they saved us. We will protect those who need protection, expose those who abuse power, and help build a galaxy where civilization is measured by compassion rather than conquest. Elena's datapad chimed one final time. The refugee convoy has entered the neutral zone. All 63 ships are reporting safe passage. Admiral Zhang is requesting permission to begin fleet withdrawal from hegemony space. Granted, Marcus said. Operation Lighthouse has achieved its objectives. But even as the immediate crisis passed, the chamber continued to buzz with activity. Delegates were forming new alliances, negotiating emergency protocols for information sharing, and beginning the process of restructuring galactic governance to account for the new reality that humanity had created. The holographic display shifted to show the Altarian refugee ships as they reached safety, their hulls battered by the journey but their spirits unbroken. On the lead ship, survivors were broadcasting messages of gratitude to the humans who had repaid an ancient debt with interest that would reshape the galaxy. Counselor Vex slowly began to regain her crystalline clarity as she processed the magnitude of what had occurred. Humanity has changed everything. The galaxy will never be the same. No, Marcus agreed. It will never be the same. But perhaps it can be something better. As the chamber gradually returned to order, delegates began the long process of building a new framework for galactic civilization. It would be built on transparency rather than secrecy, on cooperation rather than domination, and on the radical idea that compassion could be a source of strength rather than weakness. The humans had repaid their debt to the Altarians, but in doing so, they had given the galaxy something far more valuable: the chance to become worthy of the stars it claimed to rule. In the end, the galaxy's fear of humanity's power was replaced by something far more dangerous to those who would abuse their positions: hope that justice was possible, even in the vast darkness between the stars.